Hi, and welcome. I'm Cher, the Shadow Walker. And today we're talking about skinwalkers or Wendigos, whichever you prefer to call them, in Canada. So I'm starting with Newfoundland. Well, in Newfoundland, there have been reports of an entity, skinwalker, the old hag. Now, the old hag apparently can enter the body of a human, hitch a ride, and then there's also fairies in Newfoundland, and they're considered dangerous, uh, dimension shape shifting entities that can mimic the voices of people you know, attempting you attempting to lure you into the woods. Similar to a skinwalker. Every area, everything is just a bit different. In Nova Scotia, my ancestral grandfather, Grand Chief Membertou, called the skinwalkers Kluknews or Wendigos. The Wendigo, known as a cannibalistic possession, as it doesn't skinwalk, but it talks in the voice of a person it possesses. In 2021, reports from Nova Scotia Cemetery describe a 6 to 8 foot tall, slender humanoid, hunched over, gray in color to white. However, when it stood up, it had glowing eyes and a snout like face, like a Wendigo. And they believe that Wendigos have an ice heart, which is my best description of it would be like a parasite that's in you. And when they sweat it out of the person or they're able to get it out of that person, the records show that they vomit up a block of ice, like a cube of ice. Now, in New Brunswick, the ancient geological fault lines has a deep history of shapeshifters, skinwalkers, wendigos. The Chinook, which basically means an ice heart cannibal, and that's what it was became. The monster described as a giant with an ice heart cannibal, noted for blending into the forest and not being detected until they are upon the hunter. The cloven hoof. It is noted in the folklore as a handsome man that arrives, charming everyone he knows, masters the frequency to make everyone feel his magnetic pull towards him. And then during a dance, somebody notices he has cloved hooves instead of feet. And when a town folk people noticed that, he vanished into a puff of sulfur. So I found that quite interesting. To me, that's kind of more demon, but yes, it's absolutely kind of mixed in there. I mean, when you're looking at interdimensional beings and creatures, it's quite possible that what we're seeing here are interdimensional beings that have always been seen since the dawn of time, yet nobody really looks. I look at the world like a circle that's sliced fine horizontally, if you will, in thin, tiny, like cage like layers, every one of them being a dimension. When we die as a person, our energy goes to a certain dimension. Whether we're a decent person, we're going to go to the dimension where that is. And when you're not so nice of a person, you're going to go to a darker dimension because different souls are energy. And every soul, because it's different, has a different frequency of energy. So if you have a lot of negative energy in you, so you're negative all the time, that's going to go one place. And if you have happy-go-lucky positivity, you're going to go to another energy field. And if you're a very deep, dark person that's committed a lot of crimes against people, you are going to go to the darkest energy there is, and you're going to be in that plane. Is it possible for the portals to open in between the plane shifting? Absolutely. Those dimension planes, they can shift. Um, I can open portals. I'm not going to tell people how, but I can. And I didn't realize I could do that until I had an issue with shadow people that I had done it. And it was strictly because I was doing an interior design on a home that we had, and I wanted a certain symmetrical balance to it. And so, what I did in one room, which opened to the other room, I did in the other room. Thus, one reflected on the other, and I opened a portal. That's as simple as it is. And I had to close that, and I never do that anymore. And I don't speak of how to do the actual thing. Okay, so moving right along. Now, I was taught that the Bigfoot was called Gao Gao. And so when I wrote my novel, which came after I met my first Bigfoot or Gao Gao in Nova Scotia, um, I found that interesting. Now, when I'm looking back into the history, which at that time I didn't have internet where I was, so I wasn't able to access anything like this to see like I am now. But Samuel Champlain, who was friends with my ancestral grandfather, Grand Chief Membertou, in 1603 speaks of the Gao Gao. And he considered them a female shapeshifter. I call them Bigfoot. They just couldn't understand what they were. Champlain described them as gargantuous. He said they lived on the Musco Island and that they would take humans away and eat them later. So, yeah. And it's funny because I've heard that passed down through the family orally forever about them. Not a lot of people talk about it, but there's a few of us that do talk about things like that. Um, Luckily, I had a huge amount of cousins that I've visited that I'm able to draw a base from on a lot of stuff. Now, and I've also found a note which states that shapeshifters hope to, if you wanted to get rid of one, you had to strike them with a piece of metal or a nail that would draw a drop of blood and release the skinwalker out of the human being in which it was controlling. That is their belief. That kind of sounds like where they got the part about werewolves from in Silver Bullets, but I can see that they're talking about bloodletting to take out the virus that's in a person or the entity that is in within. They believe they could take it out of them that way. And that's been a tradition of many of the bands down there. In Miramichi and the Kingston Peninsula, I found records of Hoinyung, and I may not be pronouncing that right, which is the power of the medicine person. I say medicine person because my grandmother was a medicine woman. So, who could shift forms. And generally, those forms would be a giant owl. I've heard tell of a deer on the body of a human. So, the head of a deer on the body of a human. Numerous different types of forms, large birds, birds of prey primarily. And in the 19th century, missionaries who recorded the Mi'kmaq considered them as being able to take animal form and travel great distances. Now, I've heard that as well. I have never done that. Um, I have a lot of abilities to do things. One of them is not that. I can know, hone in on sometimes it comes a premonitional dream the night before of a murder, and or a murder that's occurring. I worked shift work at one time, so I was sleeping in the afternoon, and I was awoken by horrible premonitional dream of a child being murdered, and there actually was a child that was taken, abducted, and subsequently, sadly, murdered. Um, those type of things shake me to the core because there's nothing I can do. I can't stop that from happening because it's generally occurring when I see it. After somebody has murdered somebody, though, I've been able to see things as well. Sometimes I see through the killer's eyes, sometimes I see through the victim's eyes, um, and sometimes I just see the whole scene. So sometimes I hear words that make no sense to me, but after listening to a case that's gone on and being able to know, yeah, that's the case, I've seen that before, I've had visions of that. I'll hear them say things after they've solved it, and I'll go, oh, well, that makes a ton of sense now because it made no sense to me. Because when somebody is deceased and they pass the message on to me, I know this is sidetracking a bit, but that message is not for me, it's for the person that's sitting across from me, or for if the person passing the message is a victim of murder, they're passing that message to me to pass to their loved ones. It would make sense, or it would make sense to the people that are trying to solve the crime. I do not get involved in things like that. I um i don't put myself at that type of risk for anything. It's just these days it's just too crazy. So I'm going to keep going through this now. So they're saying that the Mi'kmaq people could take the form of a wolf, an owl, a bear, or a large cat. Um, I've not heard that from anyone in my family, but I could see that being possible to do if you knew certain rituals that needed to be done. And so I've also seen that they'll say that when they inhabit a being, like a person, that a Wendigo can then change its physical size to grow incredibly large to protect itself. Um, in the 1800s, there were reports of hunters going mad and beginning to act like animals that had to be restrained by their communities. They were viewed as infected spirits or souls transfers that had gone wrong. Sometimes I think when I read that I always go for the logical. Even though I'm a psychic, I will go for the logical, and I love to read medical books, pharmaceutical books, and law books. So when I see that, I see that the perhaps they got a virus, could be rabies, um, it could be from water, they could have got an amoeba in the brain, they could have histoplasmosis from fecal matter of animals. Um, Raccoons have a horrible from their fecal matter, all different types of things like that. Cats, histoplasmosis, that's bad. Amoebas in the water, yes, that's basically a brain worm. And could it cause somebody to go crazy? Absolutely. They've had that over time. They've proven that those things are there. So I think you'd have to scientifically go back and look at some of those. Now, in Miramichi, there was a fire in 1825, and reports of a phantom energy seeing figures in the smoke that looked like humans, but would change into large birds or columns of fire. They recorded to escape the fury of the heat and also helped people to the shoreline for safety. The Moolan Poolan is known as the medicine person being able to shift into the bear mullen. Yes, that I have heard of. Also, like I like fires, campfires, but yes, I can see things in the fires when I look into them. But you have to be totally relaxed to do that, and meditation is key. So that was a good shapeshifter. So they're getting some that have cannibalistic components to them, and you're getting some that are guardians or guides, just like Bigfoot, just like the hellhounds, and just like the dog man. There's always good and bad within each. And also, there's reports of the Mullen shape-shifting and helping lost hunters in the forest to find their way out. The bear shape was known to be as a protector. Um, and it would transform. So the medicine person would transform to a bear and then would find these medicinal medical roots to help in times during famine. Now, there's reports of Bigfoot out west in Canada doing that as well when smallpox was running rampant. That and in the states as well, in different parts of the states, the Bigfoot would bring plants that were medicinal and firewood to where the people lived, to their, say, driveway area, and the people would, somebody would go out and get it, and that's what helped them to survive. So I can see that, there's a lot of crossing over of things when I'm looking at this. So bear walkers were good. If you respected the land, they would protect you. That's what the people of the land, the Mi'kmaq, and all the other bands believe. You need to respect the land. And this has been centuries, okay? This is before anybody brought in environmental studies or trying to get their emissions down. This stuff has been there throughout history. And yet we have governments that don't listen to this. I think that's a note that we should look at as people in there. People aren't listening to what they're being told for centuries by the same creatures over and over again. And it's sad that as humans, we're not taking that into consideration. And so settlers described the bears with a large glowing light around them. And the bear entities that glowed at night emitted a soft, um, bioluminescent frequency. Some people found that quite calming. And it was noted that if a shapeshifter, generally a medicine person, medicine that they were doing became dark medicine, or what we'd call black magic, depending on where you're from, um, that shapeshifter then would lose its human heart and become a predator or a Wendigo, luring people into the woods and mimicking the voices of their loved ones. In Prince Edward Island, they see the Wendigo, the shapeshifter, skinwalker, whichever you prefer to call it, as a large black cat. I have property down there, and this is in the area, St. Peter's Bay over to Souris. This is an area, Goose River, that whole area that you see this cat. People see them, they see the Bigfoots, they see the Dogman, all in that area. So it'll be interesting because I spent some time down there before and I plan on going back down and living. And I have not yet seen any of these things, but I have a lot of property down there to develop. And so I'm hoping that I see something that I can take a look at because they're calling them the size of a cougar. Now, in Quebec, there was actual cougars that were black years ago. Um, Not sure if they had them there. But if anybody knows the history of Prince Edward Island, they had a massive fire, and there was always speculation that it was done by certain families that live there, very prominent families, to get rid of the deer, the moose, the bear. There's nothing there. I mean, the largest thing that you see there in animals is a coyote. And of course, you've got the koi, and they can come across the Confederate Bridge now. Um, I've not heard of a polar bear coming ashore there across the Cabot Strait. I don't really think it freezes solid in the winter. And I could be wrong on that because I've never been there in the heart of winter. Um, but it would be interesting to see that stuff. Now, in Quebec, in 1661, so again, we're going way back. My family has been in the area longer than that. The Jesuit priests reported flying canoes, and these flying canoes were on fire, and they were hurling through the air, and they were hearing human like screams that accompanied them. And they believed that they were thrown through the air to warn people of damage. Now, in the Gaspésie region, or Gaspé, they were known by the French Canadians as chasseurs galères. To the Métis, my people, they were known as Chenus. And these were the ice heart shifters. The Jesuits in the 1600s described a northern monster that was once human but became infected by corruption. I believe when you're talking about Jesuits, they're meaning spiritual corruption, and that they became extremely greedy and they turned into monsters with ice hearts. And they believed that the medicine person could take this such shifter into the sweat lodge for many days, and they would cough up a block of ice. I talked to you about this before, and thus removing the evil spirit from the person and making them free of the shapeshifter. The person would emerge, however, they would be frail, but they would be free of the monster. So they would have aged. And they believe that these shapeshifters were the result of people using dark magics to get what they wanted in life. Yeah, so greed and wealth, that was what was believed at. And they believed that if you're that they could clear a person that had a skinwalker, a wendigo, or a shapeshifter by piercing them with a steel blade. To bleed, not to kill. Knock them out of the trance, removing the wendigo from inhabiting the human. It, that's reported in all of the eastern provinces. In Ontario, there was the Jack Fiddler case, and that was in 1907. And that was up in northern Ontario, Sandy Lake. That's right near the Manitoba border. So that's the Ojibwe Cree shaman chief and his brother that were arrested by the Northern RCMP. Fiddler claimed they had killed 14 Wendigos, and they were arrested for killing a woman they claimed was a Wendigo. Now, Jack Fiddler committed suicide during his trial, and his brother was convicted and sent to prison where he died in the where he died. And then we go to Algoma district and the Sault Ste. Marie area, where they have been known, the Wendigo shapeshifters, skinwalkers, to mimic the voices of people and draw the people further into the woods, or even a child's voice, calling them deep into the woods, that they're in distress. And people, that's where police often get missing reports of people. that are later found wandering the woods disoriented, said they were following the voice of a loved one. In the Algonquin Highlands, there have been reports of bipedal shapeshifters near the Algonquin Provincial Park. Reports state seeing a creature on four legs transforming into a two-legged human, shoulder to the shoulders was human, with an animal head. So that'd be the deer head, a wolf head. I've hiked, camped extensively in this area for, I'm going to say 14 to 15 years off and on, maybe longer. And I've never seen anything like that. Come across a lot of moose and black bears and wolves, but I've never, ever seen anything like that. But I have heard of people seeing them. So the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe oral history talks of the medicine person who uses bad medicine, so basically black magic, to transform into a bear, owl, or a large dog like creature to inflict harm on people. Sightings in the Fort Francis area, Highway 11, um, of people, they still report seeing an oversized wolf or deer that transforms and appears to glitch into other types of creatures in and out. So it's like a flash on a camera. So to me, that's the shifting of energy planes. So it's shifting in and out. So there's a portal there somewhere where people are seeing this, or certain energies of rocks that the person has on at the time are coming in contact with a specific type of rock that's out there, creating an interdimensional portal that is opening. And as the person moves, they get the glitch of seeing. And so that's where that misconception is. What you're actually seeing is that creature come through the portal, and because the person moves, it's being sucked back the opposite direction. And yeah, that can happen even with opening a portal, depending on what you're attempting to bring through or ship through. In Bancroft, Algonquin Park area, which is absolutely one of my favorite places to be. I I just love it there. Um, there's been sightings of little people and or the land otter man, which lures people into the woods. Then there's the little hairy man or women. Now these are said to be 2.5 feet tall, little barefoot beings that seem to wear some type of, they're saying, skin on their body, like a fur-like coat, um, but nothing else. And they leave little tiny barefoot tracks. So there's even been reports of that in police records that I heard of years ago that there's no explanation for. And this was an interesting one because I know this area too. I've lived all over Canada, so some of these areas I know really well. So there was in 1980s, there was these three teenagers. They were what we'd call a derogatory term, a hooligan. They were guys that went out at night and created a lot of trouble. They robbed things and they liked to party and drink. So they decided to go on a camping trip, these three thugs. And they did it at the Rouge River Valley. Okay. And that's a beautiful area. That's the northeastern edge of the Niagara Escarpment, Scarborough area. And I think I got the, yeah, northeastern edge. That's right. Just outside of Toronto. Of course, Toronto's expanded so much. So to me, Toronto and Barrie are all one now because it's just grown so big. Um, so these three boys, they went camping, and the one boy's name was Bob. I couldn't find any reports on the other two guys. They he stated that they were drinking and they were vandals slash shit disturbers, pardon the language. Um, they decided when they ran out of liquor that they were going to don masks and go and rob some people that were around them. So they took their knives and their machetes that they brought to break down the branches and stuff while they were camping, and off they went to steal some booze. And apparently, they hiked out and across the road to an even more area of dense wilderness in search of campers to rob. So they thought they'd be bright and cross the road there and rob some people. And upon entering this area, they felt doom and dread. All three of them. It washed right over them. This area was very dense. They came out by the ridge and they reported seeing a 2.5-foot tall man who was naked except for a fur coat. He was grayish in color, dirty, walking with his head down, swinging his arms. They stopped in their tracks. The little person noticed them and then in, dove towards the ridge and down. Um, Once the shock wore off, they attempted to go after the person, but they never found this little person. Apparently, they stayed on the other side of the road at their camp for 3 more nights. I can't really see doing that, but they did. What else does it say? Yeah, and Bob said he never camped again, so he must have straightened out. In the Muskoka area and the Halliburton Highlands, so the Algonquin, Muskoka area, all the way up there, Highway 11 corridor, Highway 60 corridor, there's a lot of cannibal shapeshifter legends that have been handed down orally and written. So many people are seeing the owl. They can report seeing this owl like person that's 12 to 15 feet tall as a shapeshifter. Now that's big. I mean, I saw, let me think now, birds of prey. So we had a falcon land on our fence, and its wingspan was like that. It was huge. It was absolutely huge. Seen some big birds like that, and that would be the Highway 11 area that I've seen those birds in. But they, the bird that I seen, I knew it was a falcon because I know my birds. So I didn't even think of it as a shapeshifter. Now, some people report them as crawlers. So usually the ones that are crawlers, they're more like their skin is like somebody's had all the blood drained out of them. It's a gray in color with maybe a tinge of a blue. If you've ever been around people that are deceased for a bit, and the color the blood is settled. So these people, they see them crawling in unusual ways. So kind of like you'd see an acrobat being able to flip over and crawl down low. Although I couldn't see a person deliberately doing that, knowing the bush in that area. So that would be extremely unnerving to see. I don't think that I would go back into that wood area if something came crawling out like that. And the people report when they see these things that they feel fear and impending doom. Now, I wouldn't go out of fear not going back into the woods, but I would not go into that area because if something like that is coming out of that area, you have to know how to protect yourself against it. And you got to know what you're up against. So that's like split-second timing. So to me, I'm not going into something that I don't know the area. I know the woods in the area, but if I seen something like that in the area, I would not go back in there. I would consider that a warning. In Manitoba, it's a hot spot for Wendigos. It really is. So Lake Winnipeg, east side, and Poplar River and Burns River area, the dense forest there. It's written that psychic people feel an incredible energy there, and some people feel that it's a hunger energy that they feel. And apparently, after someone in this area, if you're in this area and you see a Wendigo, they report hearing whistling after and an icy pitch sound with a melody to it that's like a whistle that follows them for quite a while. White Shell Provincial Park, I've been there. That's an area where they feel them. Is it a high frequency area for psychics? Absolutely. The rocks in that area, I get an incredible energy from particular areas that I go to, certain rocks. So, yes, I can see that happening to people. But I think those people have to have a certain level of frequency to their body to be able to experience that. I believe that's what occurs with a lot of people. The high frequency areas, many sightings, they see a deer or a wolf on head like on a human's body, with a voice of a human that is bipedal and can transform back and forth from creature to human. Interlake area, the owl, again, that's another area where they see these 12 to 15-foot tall owls, that appear to people. They believe it's a medicine person that travels in the form of an owl. Highly possible. Highway 7 and 8, vehicles have been reported to being chased by skinwalkers. So this would be like vehicles being chased by dogmen. Now, the vehicles said that they described it as a 6 to 8 foot tall, running at speeds exceeding 80 kilometers beside their vehicle. Grayish in color, skinny, like with basically skin on bone, and large eyes. And they get a sense of doom wash over them. Well, I guess you would, but yes, they do. And in Sandylands Provincial Park area, oh yeah, it's a dead zone for Wi-Fi. I've been in a few areas like that, and I generally find a high frequency level for me. I get a lot of energy from the rocks in that area. So, yes. And they report in those areas seeing that pale, gray, skinish colored, disconjointed abilities. So, that's the ability to crawl on all fours or stand up or even walk with like a hinged bit to its legs in odd, I would think, looking more like an arachni at times than it would um, a wolf in at least its flexibility. And sometimes they say that they move in a robotic way. And I believe when you see something moving in a robotic way, it's because it's going in and out of interdimensions. Um, Something in that area, or even the person that's there that is seeing this is actually increasing the frequency in that area for it to come and go, depending on where they stand. And as they panic and move a bit, of course, it's going to go in and out of the frequencies. In Saskatchewan, the Wendigo, they consider it the ravenous cold. Here we find the legal and factual records of what is known as the Wendigo psychosis. In Canadian history, in 1879, Fort Saskatchewan, this is a Cree territory, and that spans right over to the Alberta border. So Swift Runners said a Wendigo haunted his dreams, telling him that he must eat his whole family, which he did, despite having access to a full supply of food. The Cree mimicked La Ronge and Stanley Mission area. The Wendigo are known to mimic voices of someone you know in distress and to lure you into the forest or camp. So this particular man that did this, um, they tried him for it. And um, when the court case was done, the trapper claimed that he was possessed by a Wendigo, and he was executed. And then there was a hanging in Saskatchewan. His crimes during the winter, he consumed his wife and his six children, his mother, and his brother. So he was a total cannibal. And this is an area still where they find that they are. Now, there was one case that I found where they tried the guy for killing people, that he felt that that's what he was supposed to do, felt that he was possessed by a Wendigo. And no, he thought they were possessed by a Wendigo. And because he was, and I don't remember which band he was from, but because he was from a particular band, and that was their oral history, that somebody that turned into a Wendigo, that they would eat everybody, so you would have to kill them. That he did that, and he actually, because of their ban laws and their tribal history, he was able to get off for that. So he did not, um, he did not stand jail time. So that's the one record that shows. In Whitefish Lake area in 1897, records show two women being treated by missionaries. The women thought they were turning into Wendigos. They had dreamt of eating human flesh in a bowl of ice. So I'm not sure whether they cured them. I couldn't find any other part of the records to that. Saskatchewan River, the Métis elders spoke of Lagarou, a creature able to shift into either a large black dog with human eyes or a headless horse. In 1885, in Battleford, Wendigo execution of three Cree men. Charles, one was named Charles, one was Dressy Man, and the other one was Bright Eyes. And they were tried for the murder of an elderly woman. And they claimed that the elderly woman was the Wendigo. This is the one. But you see, this is what I meant. It was Cree. Under the Cree law, killing a Wendigo was a protected act, not a murder. Cree law overruled the colonial laws, and thus they got off for that. Now, when we move over to Alberta, we get the stone guards in the hoodoos. So I've gone out several nights now looking to see if we could see anything, but we haven't seen anything. And we know this area quite well where the hoodoos are. Drumheller, Alberta. Beautiful museum out here, the Dinosaur Museum, the Terrell Museum. But the hoodoos are just incredible. So you've got Horseshoe Canyon, you've got Horse Thief Canyon, you've got over by Wayne where there's the bar. I just call it a bar. I guess it's a bar hotel. They have reports of them in the rocks, and even over by the Terrell Museum, they've reported people up on the trails in there have seen these shiny like beings come out of the rocks and then go fade back into the rocks. And these are the stone guardians or the sentinels. They come to life at night. One area that I didn't go to, but I was going to go get some pictures of, and I think I will, and then I'll post them. That's the Swing Bridge area in Rosebud. There's been sightings of Wendigos that shape shift from the hoodoos. And the Wayne is the area where they see the Wendigo behind. It's the Wayne Motel. It's there was a lot of it's an area of mining, so was a lot of coal mining that went on in this area, and there was a lot of unruly people with guns. And if you go into that hotel over there, that motel, sorry, it's a motel in Wayne, apparently there's bullet holes right in the wall. I've never gone in there. I can't. Can only eat certain foods. Can't eat gluten, and we don't drink, so I don't generally go into a bar because it's just not a place that we go. The Drumheller area, there's also the Old Man. Now, the Old Man The heart of a Blackfoot territory. That's where this is. So the guy is called Napa, the old man, and reports of shape shifting from taking the form of an object or a wolf or a coyote in order to interact with humans. Well, good luck on that because the coyotes here, the packs are huge. We have an abundance of deer. We even have cougar sightings right now, right where I am. So we're on the lookout for a cougar every day when we go outside. Um, Deer, you generally see deer or elk here hmm, daily for probably a 2 month period, or not a 2 month period, a 2 week period. We didn't see any. And I thought that was odd. And then all of a sudden, people were getting reports of cougar sightings. So that was understandable then because we get giant jackrabbits, we get deer, the elk, not as many. We have moose, um, not bears. There have been reports of some black bears, but not many. Further down the other side of Calgary, the grizzlies, of course, and this side of Calgary, but we're probably about an hour and 48 minutes from Calgary. And so we haven't seen grizzlies in this area. However, I wouldn't be surprised because there's a lot of canyons and ridges and areas that people just don't go in, so there's probably a lot of animals, a lot of wildlife in those areas. But if you go outside at night here in any given night, the koi packs and the coyote packs are incredibly loud and big, quite big. Too big for comfort. Let's just put it that way. I'm used to being around wildlife, but because the deer are in the towns all the time and they're not afraid of nothing. They just walk right across the main streets. Um, I think because we've pushed into nature and we haven't pushed nature out of that area. And I know that sounds awful, but if we don't put a boundary between us and nature, and we're going to have a problem. So I think that the coyotes here, it's just a matter of time before somebody gets hurt, like down in the Calgary area and even in Ontario. They're incredibly smart, although I find more of them are the koi that do it because they're the hybrid and their intelligence level in watching people, understanding how many people live at that home, literally being able to count, um, to analyze an area and know how to approach it. They're able to do that. So it would be hard to tell a shapeshifter from a coyote. Um, that's the point that I'm trying to get at because there's so many of them here. So if it came in the form of a glowing being or something out of the hoodoos, which are all around me, that would be fascinating. And I would love to see it. Now, they do shapeshift into rabbits, and we see there's the large jackrabbits here a lot in Calgary. I think they see them everywhere. So, again, because that's indigenous to this area, it's very hard to tell whether it's a shapeshifter or not. Um, Horseshoe Canyon and Dinosaur Provincial Park. It's a beautiful area. I've been all through it. And they see a large blurred or shimmering in the heat of the canyon. Now, sometimes I wonder, my father was a geological surveyor, so I learned a lot about rocks and the light off the rocks, depending on what composition the rocks were. I sometimes see like this as a reflection off certain rocks in the sun, and they're seeing that, but I can be 100% wrong on that. So don't quote me on it. Now, in the hoodoos, they see it as a large bipedal that dissolves back into the rocks. These are the ones that I've talked to, the Makasika, the spirit of the Badlands, and it's protecting the rocks. Um, so in Jewish writings, there is I can't remember what he's called, but he comes up as a creation out of mud and rock. And if you look at the hoodoos, they're bentonite and rock and many different types of minerals that are there. So a creature forming out of that, coming out to protect that area and coming back in, I could see that. I really could. And that'd be fascinating to see. British Columbia, they have the XAIS, or the Transformer. In oral history of the Salish and the Musqueam traditions, the shapeshifter doesn't just shift from human to animal, it's a geological event. So, yes, it's created out of many things. They also say that it's a very powerful being that travels the land from the beginning of time to fix issues. I can see that when you're talking about different bands and their oral history and what's been handed down. It would be wonderful if it was written, all that oral history for people to read. They would find a direct correlation in some of the things that are happening in today and the warnings that they didn't heed from the oral histories of the original people of the land. 100%. At St. Atmic, people have connected with the grizzly bear. Now, in many bands, the grizzly bear or a bear is a guardian to come to communicate, to help heal the people, and a lot of people that have a great respect for them. I do, definitely. If you've ever been close up and personal with a grizzly bear, just the presence of that being alone is phenomenal. Or a large black bear, it's just phenomenal. Well, I've petted a black bear, um, and I've been around. It actually had a friend that was a shepherd, a German shepherd, and it was in a rescue. But I've been around black bears in Ontario and in Nova Scotia, and yeah, quite close. So, but I definitely knew they were a bear. Um, I don't report, I don't see any reports here of people saying that they smell because the smell from a bear, from foxes, from coyotes, wildlife has a very distinctive musk to it. And if you ever are out in the wild and you smell something and it's coming and you're downwind from it, then that bear or that wild animal is upwind from you. But if you're upwind from it, you're not going to smell it. So, I mean, you have to use every sense when you're in the bush, especially the sense of being quiet and listening. For every one step that you take, 4 steps should be silence. That's just what I learned. Um, the coast of BC, they see the gray wolf that can also shift and become semi aquatic and swim over 12 kilometers between the islands. And they say it reports of a wolf like creature that turns into a human or a sea creature. Now, 12 kilometers is a good ways to swim, but a wolf can do that. Uh, I had a dog that I used to swim across a lake with that was a really big dog. So, yeah, we swam across, if anybody's familiar with it, Bass Lake. And so, but the water where they're talking in this area is a turbulent water. So, this is quite the creature to be able to do that. Some Squamish oral histories speak of a female Sasquatch that can transform into a flock of ravens. They symbolize the shift from earth to air. The west side of Harrison Lake is the home base for many of these encounters. And that's a beautiful area. If you've ever been there, I have. It's gorgeous. Now, the Northwest Territories, the Dene and the Inuvik people, the oral history speak of the Bushmen and the spirit of the cold. This Yataman was a giant animal creature that preyed upon humans. One such was a giant beaver that ate humans. Now, there are, if you, there's a documentary out, and I believe it was by, I won't even go into who it was by, but it was on giant beavers. So there was a search, I know it sounds funny, for giant beavers out there. The prehistoric beavers were quite large, they weren't the average beavers. And the beavers that we have today, they're incredibly intelligent. I spent time with a lady that was in Northern Ontario, up past Perry Sound. She had a sanctuary for black bears, but she also had beavers, and her name was Audrey Turney. I don't know if anybody of you know of her, but she was an incredible woman. I learned so much from her. One of the things I learned was just how intelligent a beaver was. And I always said that if I ever had an area where I could have a beaver farm and have beavers and raise beavers that could go into beavers are they are the greatest gift to our environment. They are the best, one of the best defenses we have against areas where they've taken them out. A lot of the areas out here, I'll see them living across Canada where you'd farm. You always have irrigation. You have to put it in. Otherwise, your crops are at risk. I don't see as much of that out here. So when these people have a drought, they just don't have the irrigation. They don't have the irrigation systems. But one of the other things that they don't do is they don't leave tree barriers in between acreage, that they're farming. Most of the farmers growing up in regions of that, and my one grandfather was a farmer, and my husband's family came from farming, they always left areas where it was untouched. And those areas, there could be a stream in there, a lake in that area, bush, and some of that would flood. And they always left that because they fed off that water to irrigate their fields. But the beavers and everything that was in there in the forest and in the waterways there, the streams, the farmers in Ontario felt that that helped to keep their soil erosion down and to ensure that their crops and that they had water every year. Out here, you look and they've just cut down all the trees. They've just taken the trees right away. I spoke to some people that have lived here and have lived here for generations and that were into the coal mining years ago. And they said that, yeah, they cut down all the trees. So I can see how that area, the area here is drought ridden. So when I see this area about when they're talking about something that turned into a giant beaver and ate people, I could see that as the prehistoric ones that that you can find if you look through. I think even here at the Terrell Museum they have a prehistoric beaver. I could be wrong, but I seen an image of one. If you go through there, it's beautiful. I've been through there a few times. Um, and that the Mackenzie and the Great Bear River, that's the area where they would see these giant beaver fossils. And it's believed that somebody caught one and they spread this one giant beaver fossil pelt out. And it is a fossil in the rocks that you can go and see. And then in the oral history out there again of the people of the land, it says that the skin of the giant shape shifting into a giant he defeated. So they believed that if one shapeshifter could defeat another one, it could inhabit its skin, taking its power. And the Dene people out there, they talk of the Bushman. And the Bushman usually comes if people are greedy and do something wrong. The Bushman comes around. I've heard that for generations. I've listened to that, and I know many people from that area. I know many people of the Dene and of the Cree, of the Mohawk, of the Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, Mi'kmaq, everybody. And it's funny because if you get them talking about their oral history, you see a crossover of these different beliefs that have been handed down to them of what's been seen are similar. And the whistling in the bush to lure them farther into the bush, or to even confuse them, like you're standing there, where did that come from? And you're trying to walk away from it. And as you walk away from it, you hear the whistle again. Yeah. And still to these days, shapeshifters are reported throughout Canada. So that's my take on shapeshifters, Wendigos, skinwalkers, however you prefer to call them. Um, I do think it's a lot of interdimensional, and the magnetic tectonic plates, the draw of the rocks, the energies from people that create portals to open and people to see things that they didn't think were possible. Um, so thank you for taking the time to go down this rabbit hole with me, this journey, and I appreciate it. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you.